Hi everybody, my name is David. My story is about a teacher who tricked us all just to make himself comfortable. That's how it was at first, but he did it effectively until he was exposed. Listen to the story, I'll tell you the details. So I came to school one day, and there we were met in a class by some young guy. He was only 7 years older than us, if not less. I was 17 at the time, and we were in our last year of school. He met all the students, seated them in their seats, and then said hello. On the blackboard, in his beautiful handwriting, he wrote his name, Jonathan Mitchell. That's how we met. In 5 minutes, I could already hear the sighs of the girls in the classroom. The looks of the new history teacher alone amazed all the girls. Stylish, tall, thin, with chicly coiffed hair and a dazzling smile. Plus, the whole look was accentuated by the suit that fit him like he was born with it. It was something. Putting his hands in his pockets, he grinned around the class, got a good look at everyone, and then started the lesson. And honestly, he just shined. Even I liked the way he conducted the class. He talked very colourfully, confidently. Everyone listened and no one interrupted him. Mr. Mitchell lectured us several classes in a row, assigned us homework, but never once checked it. I had no idea why he did that, but like everyone else, I rejoiced. In his classes, you could relax and just listen to his voice as background. If he was sitting at his desk, we were free to do our own thing. Personally, I was fiddling with my phone. The girl I was secretly in love with couldn't take her eyes off him. Why are you staring at him like that? You're all just obsessed with him. Shut up, David. It's not every day you meet someone as handsome as him. I agree. The suit and the clean hair do the trick. But is that a reason to dream of being a teacher? It's a good reason. You just don't get it. But all the other girls, just look at him. How smart and charismatic and intelligent he is. You already said that. Am I wrong? He is smart. No, he's not as smart as he looks. What makes you say that? He knows everything about history. Apparently, only I noticed in the 4th lesson that in fact he doesn't tell anything new. He just repeats the same chapter from the book. Okay, 3 chapters, but in a circle. He just pretends to be supposedly smart and know everything. In fact, he just uses his appearance to mesmerize the listener and seem like a genius. Delusional. Bullshit? Well, then tell me, Emmy, when did World War I start? World what? The plague? Oh my god, do you know anything about Hiroshima? Hero what? He actually read us 5 classes in a row about it. See, you never listened to him, and that's because he fascinated you. Emmy refused to believe it, but I wasn't going to let it go, because I just couldn't let the girl I was in love with fall in love with Crush, even though he didn't deserve it. I decided to investigate. First, I peeked into the teacher's lounge when they had a meeting. Usually it was Mr. Champy, the PE teacher, who was always full of ideas and was a big supporter of the school. Only thanks to him, we often had cultural events. But here the picture was the same as in our class, except you know what Mitchell was saying? I didn't hear it, but I saw it. All the teachers were like in some kind of trance, and they were looking at him and practically looking into his mouth. And then they stood up and collected the money. Then they gave the whole stack to this professor. Weird. Why? Why? And for what purpose? I began to wonder. After a moment, he came out of there with a pocket full of money, and the teacher stayed seated. After a while, one of the mathletes said, "What a great guy he is, raising money for the children with cancer. What a smart guy and so promising," they said in turn. Man, was I the only one who thought there was something wrong here? I asked a couple of my classmates about Mr. Mitchell. Bart said his sister had recently sold her gold jewelry and said she would give the money willingly to Mitchell to charity. And Steve said his girlfriend dumped him after he called Mitchell not as smart as she thought he was. This meant that his magic worked on girls and women, which meant I had an increased chance to dispel the spell. It wasn't that easy to do. All our attempts with the boys were rejected. We were either sent away or beaten. No one even heard our words. All the girls took his side, called him smart and handsome, and the rest was unimportant. Bart, Steve, we won't get anywhere that way. It's like fighting blind, and he'll always be 2 steps ahead of that way. He's got our girls, and he's begging them for money too? That's a good deal. I just don't know how he does it. He puts them in a trance. What? What? How's that? Haven't you noticed? He first looks them in the eye one by one, and then starts saying something in the background. Thanks to the right tone, volume, timbre, and speed of speech, the girls go into a trance. And because he's handsome and well-groomed, they become even more compliant. How did you know that? I researched it. All this time, Googled it, and then asked an acquaintance. He's been working in an asylum for 4 years. So what's our plan? If he's saving up for something, we gotta figure out what. I bet he's got it all on a girl. Maybe even more than one. Yeah, sure, maybe more than one. Let's get it on video and prove what a jerk he is. That same day, we had him followed. He took a big black bag out of the house and went somewhere, and we followed him in Steve's car. He came almost to the next town over. I already thought he was running a black business, but then he stopped at a very poor house, almost ruined. We waited for him to come out and followed him, and then we climbed a tree to follow him through the window. What we saw there shocked us. Are you sure it's his girlfriend? Oh yeah, and not just one, but 20 of them. I don't understand what he's doing among the grannies. Mitchell got food containers out of his bag, a bunch of medicine, spent time there, read them books, chatted, and got in the car. He drove home. The next day, I noticed my beloved Emmy picking up money again in an envelope with the girls. I couldn't stand it and snatched it out of her hands. Are you sick? What are you doing? Stop sponsoring him. Who's him? Your crush. What a history teacher. He's really smart, charmed you all sucking up money for who knows what. Idiot, we know where that money goes. Well, where does it go? Into his pocket? Then he walked into the classroom. We stopped talking right away. The girls took their seats and me, Amy, brother and Steve stayed standing. And I held the envelope with the money in it. There are a lot of rumors about me that I'm a big shot, that I'm a gigolo, or that I finance drug dealers. But you saw for yourself yesterday where I spend all the money. What? What do you mean? They were following me. I'm not judging because I took all the attention from the girls they're in love with. Right, guys? We were quiet. We didn't know what to say. That old house is a kind of nursing home. I used to live in that house myself, and then I decided to give it to the abandoned elderly. The girls do help me, but I don't ask for much. I ask for good causes, and just as much as anyone can afford to give. And your illiteracy, trance, hypnosis, or whatever? I have a beautiful, smooth voice. I give lectures, and I read the same ones just to absorb the information better. That's my methodology. I've worked at 3 different schools, and all of them have at least 10 students with honors in history. Don't you believe me? Call the schools. Ask the principals. So what you're saying is, the fact that I'm good looking is a credit to my parents, and everything else I do in good faith. I have nothing to hide. I made this suit myself, and I have a second one just like it. To look rich, it is enough to pick up the clothes on the figure and be clean. The rest is your imagination and insecurity, boys. What are you talking about? Am I wrong? Then why were you following me? Did you think I'd go to a club or casino with that money? No, I'm not into that kind of thing. And if I was, I'd obviously take more money and not work in a school and win the teacher's title for 2 years in a row. It was a fiasco. We realized we had screwed up and that our teacher was actually better than we thought and not dumber than we thought. As Emmy told me, don't judge a book by its cover. To redeem ourselves, we started helping him out with the boys. We also went to this house and spent time with the grandmothers. Then a couple of grandfathers showed up there and life got a little more interesting for the grandmothers. That's the kind of thing.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacques. I know that many people will say that the city in which I live is the most desirable city to visit because it is famous all over the world. And you know, it's true, because I live in Paris, and more recently, in the heart of the sights of the world, on the Eiffel Tower. How did I get there? Now you will learn everything, but first subscribe to my channel, and do not forget to like my story at the end of the video and write a comment. My story will be a little sad, but full of hope. My father worked as a caretaker of the Eiffel Tower. He adored his work, although at first glance it may not seem respectable, but still, my father went to work and did it from the heart. Every night when we came home, I would sit across from him on the floor, and he would sit in his favorite rocking chair, holding his coffee, and I would listen carefully as he told me what he had seen today. It was amazing, because there is just an incredible sight. From a 300-meter height, all people seem to be bugs, just like cars. It even breathes differently there. I really wanted to go there, but my father did not take me to work for security reasons. I was still very young, but my father gave me all these promises that I would definitely go there. I even remember that day. He came home and, according to our tradition, again began to talk about the past day. I listened to his story with my usual fascination, and then we went to bed. My father was a wonderful man, very humble and honest. I always knew that he was kind, because I saw him like this. He never scolded me or punished me, but only explained what and how. The next day, my mother sent me to visit my grandparents. She persuaded me to stay there for a couple of weeks, because my grandmother missed me so much, and I agreed. There was of course a bit boring, but still, I stayed. All I could think about for 2 weeks was listening to my father talk about the tower and his work. Finally, when it was time to leave, I packed up and drove home. I was accompanied by my uncle. At that time, I was about 7 years old, I think. I ran home happy, and I couldn't understand why my mother looked so upset. She didn't tell me right away that my father had left. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But how so? After all, he loved us. But what about our conversations? It was some kind of mistake. No. I didn't want to believe it for a long time, but my mother said it was true. I ran to my room. I was very angry with my father. The first thing I did was take all the photos he'd taken from the Eiffel Tower off the wall and throw them in the trash, collecting the toys he'd given me so that nothing else would remind me of him. I was so angry that I hated anything that reminded me of him. I lived with hatred in my heart for 8 years. Over the years, I never went to the tower like my friends. I never thought about it, and I didn't even ask my mother anything. What surprised me was that she didn't hold a grudge against him like I did. My mother always spoke warmly of him and said that if she rewound time, she would marry him again. In my mind, I couldn't understand how anyone could say that about a man who had left his family. Is there any trust at all now? He had betrayed all our plans and dreams, and I didn't want to know or remember him anymore. So I grew up. My mother aged over the years. I was her only child, and at times I regretted it, because I sometimes missed someone to share my thoughts with. My parents got married late, respectively. My mother was already aged. I began to notice strange things about her. She sometimes talked to herself, and if you listen closely, she talked to my father, only in her mind. One day at dinner, my mother had a bad headache. I brought her pills, and she called me by my father's name. I told her that I was her son, and she said to me, "You are a copy of your father. He was so kind. He didn't want you to see him die," she said. "What? What do you mean? He left us," I told her. At this moment, my mother seemed to come to her senses and realized that she had said too much. She wanted to pretend that she was just confused in her head, but I did not leave her behind and forced her to tell the whole truth. She said my father hadn't really left us. He was very ill and died. They knew how long he had left. Everyone knew except me, and I was sent to my grandparents' house on purpose so that I wouldn't see the funeral. It was my father's will. He wanted not to be upset and asked his mother to make up a legend that he allegedly left the family. I couldn't believe he was gone then. I suddenly remembered the pictures my father had taken for me over the years. I threw everything away and I was so sorry. I loved those photos. And then, as if reading my mind, my mother pulled the box out of the room. She didn't throw them in the trash, but kept them. I was so grateful to her. The first thing we did was go to his cemetery, and then I went alone to my dad's place of work. I should have done this a long time ago. I went up to the tower and saw the observation room. There are many things left from my father. For so many years they were changed workers, but none of them could create the atmosphere that my father achieved. He had a little bit of his own attitude to work, more like a hobby, and he managed to pass on his love for the city and the tower to me. I sat in his chair, picked up his old work jacket, and just stared into the distance. Unexpectedly for me, I burst into tears. I had carried only hatred in my heart all these years, and it turned out that my father was willing to sacrifice his good name just so as not to upset me, not to hurt me. I didn't even have time to say goodbye to him, and I was so sorry about it. While I was there, I felt like my dad was sitting next to me. No wonder, because it was his favorite place. I went home, packed some things, and told my mom that I was going to stay with a friend for a couple of days, and then I went to my dad's old job. In his observation room, I laid out my things, took a camera to take the best pictures of the city at dawn. I decided that now I will live there and continue the work of my father. I will love my Paris, take photos, and remember my father. Tell me, have you ever been in Paris? What did you like most about it? And if not, what places would you like to visit, and why?